Hey everyone, thanks for checking out my 2018 PS Vita retrospective. Don't worry if you think I'm becoming like a Kingdom Hearts channel or something. I'm just doing a couple of those videos and then I'm going to get back to retrospectives. I have a lot planned over the next couple weeks, so stay tuned for those. And in February, I'm going to try and get through all of the previous years of the Vita so I can try and wrap up that whole library before they stop making physical carts in March. It was a really interesting year for the Vita. I think it's the first year that we're really starting to see publishers not have any faith in it anymore. A lot of the games that would be Vita exclusives have moved on to become PS4 as well, or also have Switch versions. So I think that publishers are starting to see Switch as a Vita replacement, which is kind of sad because it's not the same, but at least those games are going somewhere physically. There's still some genres I really prefer to play on the Vita, especially visual novels and, some niche JRPGs, so it's great that stuff is still coming out, at least for now. But the writing is on the wall. It's not just Sony stopping the physical production. By my count, there was only 9 physical releases this year for the Vita. Only 7 of them were exclusive, and nearly all of them were visual novels. It is worth noting that most of the support for the Vita this year came from Limited Run Games, who sold 27 Vita games in 2018. Some of the other small publishers, like Signature Edition and Strictly Limited, also put out a couple Vita releases. You could also import a couple EU games from Red Hat Games, who put out some physical releases. And there were some cool Japanese exclusives and Asia releases that had English on them, so that's worth looking into. There were about 65 digital games released as well, but most of them aren't exclusive. Very few of them actually are. Just to cover off quickly the shutdown, Sony announced that they're no longer going to produce physical carts in March of this year, so developers had to get in all of their code, I think late last year, in order to get carts made, and that even counts for things like these small publishers, Limited Run Games. Everyone has to get their Vita carts from Sony, so that's a bit of a shame. I guess you could still go through Sony Japan. It seems like they might still be making carts, but I'm not actually sure because they've even announced that they're discontinuing the Vita hardware, so I don't even know if that's an option. As if that wasn't bad enough, Limited Run Games had come out and said that apparently Sony has said that they don't even have enough carts ready to make all of the games that publishers have put in. So 10 of their games are kind of in limbo to see if there's even enough physical carts to make those games. So 10 of those 27 games may be cancelled. We're just waiting to see how that goes, but that's a real shame because, Sony said they were going to keep producing physical carts until March, but I guess actually they're not. They're just going to use up the stock they have and then that's it. Sony did say that digital games are going to keep coming out in 2019 and on, but honestly, with how few digital exclusives came out this year, I don't really see much hope there either. So let's get right into the physical releases of 2018 that are worth knowing. There's not too many true exclusive games, or even console exclusives, so I'm going to cover some stuff that also came out on other PlayStation platforms, just to cover a bit more here. I'll get into the digital stuff right after this. The first exclusive was Hakuoki Edo Blossoms. Hakuoki is probably the most popular Otome visual novel in English. If you've seen my other retrospectives, I'm sure you've heard by now, but that's basically a visual novel where you play a female character and features some light dating sim elements with the men in the game. Honestly, this game has been remade so many times, it's pretty confusing. From what I understand, the Kyoto Winds remake that was released earlier was an updated and remastered version of the first half of the original game. And this follow-up gives the same treatment to the second half. So if you played through that Kyoto Winds game and want some more, this is the perfect follow-up to that. Right after that, we got Code Realize Future Blessings, a release of the first fan disc follow-up to the original Code Realize Otome visual novel. This game features segments that flesh out some events from the original game and show some stuff that happens to the characters afterwards. This game was released on the PS4 with the main game bundled together as Code Realize Bouquet of Rainbows. And then the first game I picked up this year, Psychedelica of the Black Butterfly. Now this is another Otome visual novel. These ones I like to grab if they seem interesting because I'm not sure if I'm into the genre yet, but I want to give it a try. It's just they take so long and I'm so swamped with other stuff. But these things disappear fast, so I think you can still get some of these games, but you never know which ones are going to disappear completely, and I just rather get them when I'm interested in them than have to worry about that later. In this game, you play a girl who wakes up in a creepy mansion with no memories of how she got there. She's pursued by monsters and teams up with others to explore the mansion and regain their lost memories. The game features some action segments to break up the visual novel stuff, and being an Otome game, there are the typical romance subplots. Following that is 7 Scarlet, another Otome visual novel by Idea Factory. This one is about a girl and her friend who go to a remote town looking for her brother who disappeared there over a year ago. There's a ton of legends and mysteries surrounding the town that the girls get wrapped up in. And I'm sure they'll meet some interesting male characters along the way to befriend. The story here sounds promising enough, and it has some good reviews, so I'm going to think about picking this one up as well. Following that, the biggest thing I have on this table, this is a Kickstarter I backed and one of the few Kickstarters that I'm really happy with the result. That is the Muv Luv trilogy of visual novels. I backed it like a medium tier, not too crazy, but I got a lot of cool stuff. There's a lot more stuff, but yeah, let's quickly go through this stuff since there's not too much to talk about here. You get the 3 games. They come on 2 carts. The first one, Muv Luv cart, comes with Muv Luv Unlimited and Muv Luv Extra, and the second one is a Muv Luv Alternate. Along with that, I got the, I guess you call it, collector's box here. Muv Luv soundtrack. It's got, what's this, 3 CDs? They both have, well, they have an average of about 26 songs each. And I got this Muv Luv art book, which just has some cool art from the game. There is a figure rather, of the, I think the main character in her alternate outfit. And the thing that makes me a sucker for these kinds of packages, the Muv Luv Alternative Codex. Now this is just a huge book, over 400 pages of just lore, like tons of lore. It's mostly writing. This is exactly the kind of stuff I love to get with special editions, more than anything else. Like, I could care less about figures and stuff like that, statues that take up space, but these kinds of lore books that really help flesh out the universe, I will go for every time if I'm interested in the game. So yeah, apparently Muv Luv is one of the most popular visual novels from Japan. It starts off as a typical anime high school story, before becoming a game about girls who pilot mechs during a war. It sounds kinda generic, but there's so much fanfare that I really need to play through the whole thing to see if it lives up to the hype. The Vita versions are censored, with some of the sexual scenes removed or with less explicit art, and some of the game's gore is toned down compared to the PC uncensored version. But thankfully this came out before Sony's censorship policies changed, otherwise I can't imagine what it would have been like. If you do care about that kind of stuff, you can just play the Steam version. One annoying thing about being a Kickstarter backer was that because of their publishing deal and because of Sony's kind of run on carts, the physical version was released to retail before it came to us backers. So there was a couple weeks where people could go to the store and buy their game that we were still waiting. So that's a shame, but now that that's over with, I guess it's not too big of a deal. If you're into visual novels, this is probably the one to play this year. Following that was Psychedelica of the Ashen Hawk. Another Otomate visual novel, but by the same writers and artists as Psychedelica of the Black Butterfly. It's a completely different plot, setting, and characters. Aside from the name, I don't think there's any links between the 2 games. This game takes place in a town full of superstition and ruled by opposing clans, where a girl has to hide that she was born with the witch's mark. Her secret may be revealed as she gets wrapped up in the theft of an ancient artifact. I'm not too interested in this one based on the plot, but if I play and love Black Butterfly, well, I might pick it up just to see what else this team can do. And following that, another game on my table. This came out for PS4, but I thought this deserved to be played on Vita. That is Punchline. This is a visual novel with adventure game elements by the developers behind some of the Vita's best visual novels. While most of Mage's previous novels have been more serious, Punchline goes in the complete opposite direction. It's ecchi themed and full of panty shots and nosebleeds, and the kind of gags that you would expect to go along with that. Apparently it's based on a 12-episode anime that I never heard of by the same name, and apparently this is written by the original creators with new scenarios and endings added in. The main character in the game is a boy who's been kicked out of his body and is trying to get it back from whoever took it. To do so, he needs to grow his spirit powers to manipulate the environment and use the other residents in his building to complete objectives. Yeah, it's a visual novel, but it also plays out kind of like a 999 or a Danganronpa, where in between visual novel sections you're kind of doing a room puzzle and trying to figure out what you need to do to progress. It's just weird and crazy and worth checking out if you're into games like Danganronpa and don't mind this kind of style of anime. And following that, the last notable physical game of the year is Deathmark. So this also came out on Switch and PS4, and I got the Switch version, but I think the Vita would be a great way to play this game too, so I'm mentioning it here. It's a visual novel with dungeon crawling and adventure-like elements. In the game, your character has been cursed with the Deathmark and will die within 24 hours. You end up at the mansion owned by someone who is researching the curse and meet other marked people. Together you explore locations, solving puzzles, dealing with spirits, and trying to break the curse. You move through the locations like a first-person dungeon crawler, and search rooms to find the items needed to progress and exorcise the ghosts. The dungeon crawling stuff is really light, the environments aren't too big, there's no random battles, it's really just about moving around, searching, finding items, and using those in the right spots. It's really interesting. So with that, let's get into the notable digital releases. There's very few exclusives here, so I'm going to mention stuff that also came out on PS4. So yeah, let's just dive into those ones and see what was great this year for that. So let's start off with Little Red Lie. This is an indie retro-style narrative game where you play as two characters, a sketchy salesman and a middle-aged woman who's lost her job. The game's interesting story comes from all the lies that both the characters tell. Then we got Digimon story Cyber Sleuth Hacker's Memory. Like the first game in the series, this sequel only got a digital release on the Vita. However, you can import an Asian physical version that has English on it. The game takes place in the same timeline as the previous Cyber Sleuth game, but features new characters and a mostly unrelated story. After that was Under Night in Birth EXE Latest. This is the latest update of this game, and it's also available on other PlayStation consoles, but it's worth mentioning that a portable version of this 2D Japanese doujin fighter is available on the Vita and includes the 20 characters. Then we got The Longest 5 Minutes, a retro-style RPG where the whole game takes place over a series of flashbacks set during the final boss fight, where the main character tries to regain his lost memories of his journey so he can beat the boss. This was released physically on the Switch last year, but NIS has announced that a Vita version will be coming out this year physically. Then we got Secret of Mana. Now, because local co-op is the best way to play this remake of the classic action RPG, this version really isn't as notable as the PS4 one, but it's worth pointing out that the Vita got a digital release as well. Moving on to Damascus Gear Operation Osaka, a top-down mech action game that was also released on the PS4. The story here revolves around a pilot who's trying to pay off the huge debt they've amassed in a futuristic world where the humans almost lost a war to enemies called the Rage. In the game, you customize your mech and take on different arena battles. You can also take on missions in randomly generated levels to find new parts to upgrade your mech. Then the first real digital exclusive, Root Double Before Crime After Days Extend Edition. This was a Kickstarter visual novel, and it met its goal to unlock a Vita port, but the developer said the game was too big to have a physical release, so it's only available digitally. The game takes place in a future where the government has quarantined psychic humans in cities that aren't allowed to contact the outside world. When something goes wrong in one of the cities, two characters are sent in to investigate. The game features two routes, the after and before routes, which each feature a different character. Throughout the game, the player will use the Senses Sympathy system, which allows them to basically choose how their character feels about the events in the game. Their feelings alter the character's choices and decide which of the paths the story goes down. Then another Vita exclusive, and it's not a visual novel for a change. Sir Eats a Lot. It's a cartoonish 2D platformer with an interesting cartoon art style and graphics. You play the big-bellied knight who is trying to save his kingdom from the witch who's poisoned it. The game features 13 levels full of characters, puzzles, enemies, and upgrades. It also uses the Vita's touch and motion controls as inputs for special abilities. Overall, this one flew under the radar this year, but if you're into Vita exclusives, it's worth taking a look at. A limited edition physical version was released for import on PlayAsia as well, so if you're really into having a collection of Vita exclusives, that might be worth checking out. Following that is Penny Punching Princess, a pixel art top-down beat-em-up starring a deposed princess and her undead friend who battle and bribe their way to reclaiming their kingdoms. The two playable characters have different abilities and attacks, but the concept is similar. You go through stages filled with enemies and traps, collecting gold or a skull currency, and then optionally use that to bribe enemies to bypass traps or get by enemies that could be tough. There's also a kingdom building system in between stages where you can build up your temporary kingdom to unlock new features. This is another one of the games that NIS America has announced will get a physical release this year. And then, Bunny Must Die, Chelsea and the Seven Devils, a Vita version of the PS4 port of the PC dungeon crawling action RPG, where you play the cat-eared character Bunny, who uses 5 different weapons and the ability to manipulate time in order to get through the game's stages. It features 16-bit style art and fast-paced action through stages full of traps and enemies. You'll need to switch between your weapons and use all your abilities to get through. This also had a physical release that you can import if this is something you're into. And next is The Lost Child. This demon-capturing modern-day Japanese RPG with turn-based battles was released physically on the Switch and PS4, but like the other games, NIS has announced a Vita physical version coming out next year. Following that, I don't know how to say this, Mucinix, a rhythm game by the developers of DJ Max and Super Beat Sonic, featuring 50 tracks. This was also released on the Switch, but given it was by the DJ Max team, I wanted to give it a quick mention here since, that series has a lot of, following on the Vita and PSP. Next up is Rainbow Skies, the follow-up to Rainbow Moon, which was also released on PS4 and 3, but given the original had a fair share of Vita fans, I thought I'd mention it here. It's a tactics RPG with quests, dungeons, monster breeding, crafting, fishing, and more. Then 2 games that should have had physical releases, but they didn't sadly, Persona 3 Dancing in Moonlight and Persona 5 Dancing in Starlight. These two follow-ups to Persona 4 Dancing All Night were only released physically on the PS4, but they are great games to play on the go, so you might want to look into the Vita versions instead. In fact, the way the interface is designed makes it way easier to see what notes are coming up on a smaller screen. The games are based on Persona 3 and 5 obviously, and feature a simpler storyline where Elizabeth is facing off against Justine and Caroline to see whose team can dance the best, based on her hearing about the events of Persona 4 Dancing All Night. There's about 30 tracks in each one, there's a ton of DLC, you unlock different costumes and accessories you can put on the characters, and it's just a blast for people who love Persona games. Next up, in December, we got Dragonfly Chronicles. This is technically a Vita console exclusive, since the only other version I think is the Steam one, but it looks like it may come to PS4 this year. This is a 2D action platformer with an art style clearly inspired by superhero comics. In the story, after the death of his father, Mark goes looking into the government agency known as Dragonfly that has research facilities dedicated to human experimentation. The game features the platformer levels as well as vertical and horizontal shoot 'em up segments. The trailer looks a bit rough and I can't find any reviews, but if it controls well it could be a decent game, just maybe go in with a bit of caution if you're interested. For right now though, I have to mention it because it technically is a Vita exclusive this year and worth knowing about. And lastly, December 18th, we got London Detective Mysteria. The perfect finale for the year since it's another Otomate visual novel and a fully Vita exclusive game. I think a Steam version is coming, but I don't think it's available yet. For the game's theme, late Victorian era mystery and romance novels combine to create the world for this visual novel, where you play as the heiress to House Whiteley, who's more interested in London mysteries than her family's introduction to high society. Through her investigations, the main character will meet characters related to famous historical and fictional figures, like people descended from Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie, Lupin, Jack the Ripper, and more. And of course, your choices decide who you'll end up in a relationship with. So that's it for 2018, so still some things, not very many exclusives, but some worth checking out for sure. Like I said, subscribe and stay tuned for the previous years of the Vita and my other 2018 retrospectives, as well as just all the retrospectives I'm going to do coming up. Thanks for checking out this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.